there's a record number of millionaires in this country. So it's like those people
Yeah.
also a lot of times say that they're struggling. And I think a lot of it is just what you said, where a lot of people's wealth is very much locked up in these illiquid assets, whether that be homes or retirement savings.
Retirement.
And
Yep.
again, like you can't eat a house. You can't go on vacation with the
You
house.
shouldn't.
And so I think because it's not this like easily accessible thing, and that's why I personally really define freedom as optionality. If I, like, for example, woke up and I was like, I hate New York, I need to get out of here, I can. And some people can't do that. And I think
Yeah.
for me that is a freedom that is so worth it to me.
Welcome back to the Time Freedom Podcast, where you can learn how to rethink your work and your money to create a life you love right now. Join us for insights to help you find meaningful freedom so you can choose how and when and with whom you work for as long as you want. Here are your hosts, me, Brian Harriott, and Kirby Dennison.
Today, we welcome Hanna Horvath. Hanna is a certified financial planner and money psychology expert. She's based in Brooklyn, New York. Hanna writes the newsletter, Your Brain on Money, which explores the hidden psychological forces behind our financial decisions. A Syracuse journalism grad and with her master's from NYU, Hanna previously served as managing editor at Policy Genius and held editor roles at JP Morgan Chase and Bankrate. She helps individuals and organizations understand money behavior through her 3 forces framework, examining the internal scripts, social pressures, and structural designs that shape how we handle money. Her work has appeared in NBC News, Business Insider, CNBC, and USA Today. Hanna Horvath, welcome to the Time Freedom Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I am particularly excited to have you here. So we met at a FinCon conference in Portland in the fall and just had a very brief conversation on some comfortable chairs. And I liked your energy. But now that I've gotten to know you a little bit more, I would say, I think we'll learn more about you, but maybe earlier in your stage towards your path to time freedom. And the reason why, and I love that demographic because a very quick story. I've invested a lot of time in writing a good book. And one of the things I did is go to this editing retreat, which was on Madeline Island in Lake Superior, a random place that many people may not know where that is. But one of the exercises that we did was to write your absolute best Amazon review and your absolute worst Amazon review. This was before you even, you're midway through your book. And then I did that, and then you read them, and then they kind of told you what they thought about it. And my best Amazon review was from somebody who was not my targeted reader, which was the middle life person. It was actually someone who was in their late 20s, early 30s. And I didn't even realize why I did it that way or that's why I thought it was the best. But anyway, what that did is it didn't change my whole book, but what it made me do was add a series of, I think there's like 8 or 10 little call-out boxes all throughout the book that are like, if you're starting out or starting again, here's a little kind of variation on the theme of the advice, which I thought I'm so proud of. I'm so happy that happened. And I'm glad that I did that. And anyway, I think you have a lot of, as we were prepping for the episode, you have a lot of really great questions that I cannot not wait to talk about related to that.
I'm super excited. Yeah.
Cool. We're trying out some kind of more fun type questions. And I don't know if you've even had a chance to take a look at this ahead of time.
I did briefly.
Okay, good. So you can do 1, 2, or 3 of these questions, and then we'll also do ours too, just in the interest of sharing and being fair about it. And the reason why we do this is because in season 1, Kirby and I just kind of chit chat a little bit at the beginning, and that's the part of the show that most people like the best. And so we figured we'd try to carry that theme over here. So anyway, how would you like to approach it? Is there a particular one that you want to answer?
I could do all or any.
All of them? Okay, well, let's do that then. So one of the questions that I always find fascinating, is what have you changed your mind about as you've gotten older and wiser over the years?
Yeah, I'm someone, so first of all, first thing you show me is I'm extremely type A. And so with that comes this sense of like, I need to be doing, it's like this relentless self-optimization. So something that I've really changed my mind on is, and this is like probably so cliche, but the importance of rest and how rest actually is quite productive in the long-term trajectory of your work. I think I would find myself like in points, especially like early in a couple years into my career, is like just getting bogged down in the doing and not taking those like really important, deliberate moments of rest. And I think also in our society, we see productivity as physically doing something or sitting in front of a computer or writing something when there's a lot of productivity in walking around outside in nature and thinking about things. And that's been a huge thing for me to like let myself go a little bit and understand like even if you're not doing what you yourself and also maybe what society deems as like productive, that actually could move you forward. Like, they joke about like the shower thoughts. Like sometimes your best breakthroughs and creative moments really do come from these moments of deliberate rest. And so that's something I've really changed my mind on over the past couple years, definitely, is prioritizing that.
I love that. The name of our software company I thought of in the shower. That was a very
Yeah.
specific example. The other thing I heard of is I read some story that said, like, if you're extra tired in the morning, like you've been working out all week, that you should just sleep that morning.
Yeah.
That's actually could be just as productive as doing that extra workout. And I always use that as an excuse. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Another question that I like to ask is there been anybody in your life that's kind of changed the trajectory of your life?
Yeah. I would say, one of my first mentors, so one of my first managers at my first job, I was a financial journalist at the time. And, at the time I loved to write, but I was as somebody who has used to have a lot more of a scarcity mindset with money, I was very preoccupied with making as much money as possible and like building that financial foundation, so to speak, but more from a place of like anxiety. And so I love to write and I just felt like, well, I need to go work at like a bank because that's more secure and stable and I need security and stability. And I remember I was talking to my mentor about this and he was kind of like, well, what are you so scared of? What's the worst thing that could happen here and what's the best possible thing that can happen here? And it's likely that the best possible thing, I mean, at this point, I was in my mid 20s. I had no dependents. I was healthy, and so just thinking through that, because as somebody who is more risk adverse and is willing to put my passions on the side for stability, it really had me rethink that relationship and rethink like, what do I actually want to get out of my life? And, is there a way to pursue your passions in a way that is obviously still taking into account like stability, but
Yeah.
not sacrificing everything. I think it's really easy to get heads down and like hyper focus on like, I just need stability. I just need stability. And it's easy because like, we're anxious people. A lot of us are. And when the world around us feels very uncertain, we cling to anything that feels certain. And I very much subscribe to that. So he really kind of shook me out of my shell, so to speak, and allowed me to really start to think about more entrepreneurial endeavors, doing things that were a lot more aligned with my passions.
I love that. I love it. I'm not fortunately, I'm not an anxious person, but I'm very much about stability, and
I'm
I've
so
definitely
jealous.
made
You're not
choices in my life. People tell me I'm lucky sometimes, but I think maybe I'm just not paying attention.
I think a lot of anxiety is paying too much attention or being hyper focused on scenario. It's all a form of control. Like it's like you're anxious
Mhm.
about uncertainty. So in that way, it's good to maybe just put the blinders on and say whatever happens is going to happen. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I am jealous.
I think it's a balance. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I've
definitely.
also gotten feedback like, yeah, stop just doing like, why are you doing what you're doing? Anyway, um, and last but not least, the third question is, what is the third question? Oh, what's something that few people know about you?
Yeah. So outside of thinking and writing and talking about money, which really does take up like 95% of my life, I would say I am like so obsessed and passionate with it. I am a avid reader and a runner and mostly a reader. I think for me, because again, going back to like, I'm pretty, type A, a little high strung sometimes. And so for me, a lot of anything I do outside of like work, I want it to be escapism and I want it to not involve a screen. That's like my goal. So I'm a huge reader. I'm a huge fiction reader. I read about 100 books a year. So if I'm not doing this, I'm like head is in a book. It's like one of my favorite things.
I'm sure you have a Goodreads account then, and you're kind of keeping track of all of yours if
I
if you're
do.
focused like that. Well, I'll have to introduce you to my wife because she reads tons of fiction as well, and
I love
maybe you
it.
have similar tastes.
I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Cool. All right, Kirby. So just to be fair, do you want to share an answer to at least one of those questions? And I can do it too.
Yeah. So I'll do the last one. So something that most people don't know about me is I live in Colorado and I've literally never skied.
Oh, either kind, like cross
I water
country or
ski, but not snow ski or
Where in
snowboard
Colorado do you
or
live?
I'm in a small town called Yuma.
I have no idea who that is, but cool.
It's by the plains. It's not the mountains, unfortunately. Nobody
Colorado's
knows
so
where it
cool
is.
because there's so much different geography there. Yeah.
So much. I just rented Telluride for the first time, actually right before FinCon. It was beautiful.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's one of the like better places, I feel like. Right
So
now it's abnormally warm. Like it's supposed to be almost 70 today. So
It is not
usually should be
that in
30.
New York.
It's not that in California either.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
crazy. It's so weird.
My thing that few people know about me is something that I kind of just realized a little bit last night is my son is a very good drummer and has never really had lessons. He's in the band. He's a ninth grader, so it's the first time he's played drums before. But he had his winter concert last night and he was like featured on this song and was like just rocking it out. And like it was one of those songs where it starts kind of slow and then it flips into an upbeat and he started playing and everyone went, ah, it was so cool.
That must have been such a wonderful moment as a parent because it's like you almost didn't understand the full
Yes,
scope. Yeah.
it was so great. It was really
Yeah.
cool. It was cool. And then the higher level bands were really good. So I'm able to kind of see what his trajectory will be. So
Amazing.
I have a son that's a good
That's
drummer.
cool.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start talking about time freedom. So, Hannah, one of the things that I like to do at the beginning is just to help listeners get a sense for who you are so you can kind of
Mhm.
place someone in your head. Can you just give us some like quick demographics about you? I mean,
Yes.
you kind of mentioned where you live and stuff, but like, just basic stuff.
Yeah. So I live in New York City. I live in Brooklyn. I've lived here for almost 10
Awesome.
years. I'm a pretty much diehard New Yorker. I'm pretty much set here probably. It would take a lot to get me to leave. I started as a financial journalist. I became a CFP, and now I would say a lot of my work is split between doing financial planning for individuals, doing a lot of my content about money psychology, and then working. I also work with a lot of financial startups, helping them with their products and marketing and stuff. And then outside of that, as I was saying before, huge reader, huge runner. Really my ultimate goal with my time outside of work is like finding a way to balance those things as much as possible. Because I think, at least for me, when you have kind of multiple, mini careers in one, and you also do a lot of your work from home, that work-life balance gets super blurred super fast. So that's kind of how I kind of spend my days and how I try to organize my time.
So you talk a lot about money. I mean, it's part of your life day to day. As we were prepping for the episode, one of the things that kind of stuck out with you in some of these concepts I talk about with time freedom is our early experiences with money and how that relates to our money psychology. You must like The Psychology of Money as a book then, I'm guessing.
Love.
If this,
Love.
Me too. Oh my God, I really like that book.
Yeah.
It kind of was the reason I wrote my book, which is like chapter 7, all we want is freedom. But I'm like, how do we do it? So that's what I'm trying to answer. But anyway, tell us about your early experiences with money and how that's kind of shaped things for you.
Yeah, definitely. So, I grew up with a ton of advantages. I wasn't financially insecure. My parents actually talked pretty openly with us about money growing up. So I did have a general understanding of like, the value of a dollar. I worked starting from a very young age. So I think, that at least to me gave me really, really important lessons about like time and money and how those two things intersect with each other. Because I was making, I guess the minimum wage is still $7.25. I was making $7.25 an hour, at a coffee shop. And again, that really does kind of wire how you think about what your time is worth and stuff like that. And then of course I became a CFP, and so like from there, from my family. Oh, and I'll mention too, my family also extremely type A, high achieving. That kind of family. We run the turkey trot on Thanksgiving. It's like we're
Or were you born and raised in New York
I was born and raised in DC.
DC?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just, I think for me that, and also I grew up, the school I went to, so it was just a very academic environment. And so I think for me, I, really developed this almost like chip on my shoulder because I wasn't very good at school and stuff. So I felt like I needed to prove myself somehow. And I think in that environment, you get very hyper fixated on these like quantifiable metrics, I always say. So that could be grades. And then as you get older, that could be, how much money you make. And so I think for me, it's like I was in this place where I really wanted to prove myself and prove that I, could do it and be successful. And, when you have this idea of I want success, again, you're anchoring yourself a lot of times to these numbers. So I think that environment taught me a ton about money, but it also did give me this money anxiety that really was the catalyst towards my figuring out my relationship with money and then the work that I do now.
So if you write a lot about money psychology, and who is your audience? What are the things that they're nervous about? I'm just
Yeah, definitely.
curious.
So I would say my audience is probably like mid 20s to mid 40s. Typically high earners. I would say a good portion of my audience is like the Henry. So, they're making a lot of money, but maybe they don't have
Yeah,
a
what is
ton of.
that? Sorry,
Oh,
Henry.
yeah,
I
I'm
know
sorry.
it's an
I like
acronym.
jumped
I
the
know
gun
I've heard it.
completely.
I just can't remember.
So I'd say a portion of my audience is Henry's, which is an acronym that stands for high earner, not rich yet. And so the classic example they give is like someone that's making like a couple $100,000, but is essentially living paycheck to paycheck. And again, I live in New York. I would say I know lots of people that make over six figures, and I would say many of them do not feel financially secure at
Yeah.
all. And I think for me, a lot of the work I do is talking through or unpacking some of those like internal stuff that's going on that shapes how we think about money, but also all this external stuff that's going on around us because that also influences all the money decisions that we make.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Anyway, yeah, like I live in San Francisco Bay Area, same
Yeah,
sort of
same
deal.
thing.
What I wonder sometimes is like how can people be teachers here? Like they're here. There are teachers, it's just such a tough environment. One I have a framework in the book around different money personalities, and
Hmm.
how I like to share it is that a lot of the things that I've seen in other work around money personalities usually is like, you're a spender or you're a saver or
Yeah.
something like that. And
Yeah.
you know,
We're all spenders and savers, essentially. Like,
I know, right? Exactly. But it always felt like, well, if you're, saver and investor, that's the right one, the
mm-hmm.
way that I've read it. And I'd never loved that. And I think some of it comes from the fact that I have a son who I don't think will ever be a saver, but he's super entrepreneurial and he's going to be a money maker.
Yeah.
And I think that he's going to be able to be successful in life because of that. Anyway, the three biggies I have are, the money minimizer, which is like you kind of just don't want to deal with money for
Yeah.
various reasons. The money manager, which is that one that's more typically framed as the good one, which is, I can save and invest and find value and all that good stuff. And then the money maker is the entrepreneurial type who actually what I believe is that's probably the most freeing of all of them, because if you are able to just turn on the money spigot, because you have this ability to just sell or do whatever, like that's pretty freeing. You can turn it on and off. Where do you fit in those?
Yeah, I would say if you had asked me a couple of years ago, definitely moneymaker. I always came to things from a frame of reference as like, well, if I want to save for this or if I want to have this amount of money, I don't need to cut back my expenses. I just need to make more. That was like
Yeah.
very much kind of my mentality.
Yeah.
I am getting to a place now though, because for a lot of my career it was like, okay, when I hit this milestone, everything, I'm going to feel great. I'm going to have no more anxiety. Then it was this next milestone. And so then again, that was a lot of me kind of figuring out my own relationship with money. And now I'm kind of in this place of like, what is enough? What is that number? And I'm sure that gets very much into like this idea of time freedom and like, what is that number that will give you that freedom? Because freedom looks completely different for different people, as you well know. So I'm trying now to kind of get probably closer to that like money manager, even money minimizer. Like I see it as like someone who's like, life isn't about money. I can set up a system where I can make good money decisions, but I don't have to think about it all the time. And so that's where I'm trying to aim right now, but definitely money maker for much of my career.
You just to continue the thread of the conversation, you talked about freedom looking differently to people. Absolutely agree. What does it look like to you? Like, do you have freedom now? I'm curious, like from your perspective, and what if you don't? What does it look
That's a
like?
great question. So I assume that freedom will look very different at different phases of my life. I don't personally right now see freedom as not having to work because I like to work. And I don't personally, that's not how I'm defining freedom. I see freedom as more or less being able to like having optionality. So if I wanted to go do something, I could go do it. It wouldn't be a big problem. I'm someone that also travels a ton. Like I said, I work mostly remote, so I can really kind of work from anywhere. And it's very important to me to have that flexibility to be able to travel like when and where I want to. And that to me is freedom or the freedom to like not, I mean, yes, I do budget. I'm not like just spending wildly, have no idea what's happening. But I am able to say yes to the vast majority of things in my life without having to think too much about it. And actually, it was funny, a couple years ago, I'd like saved all this money. And I remember thinking, like, oh, well, I've saved this money. I should buy a house, because that's what everybody's doing. Right. Like, and so it's like,
Yeah.
I was like looking at houses, which in New York, buying an apartment in New York is already just like a whole thing. So, I was looking into it. I was like, wow, this is like, seems like a lot. And it's a huge commitment, not even money wise, but like time wise. And I remember started thinking, I was like, is this really what I want? Like, and that got me into like, what do I actually value? And what do I want my money to do for me? And I realized like I value flexibility and experiences. And so like those things are probably not conducive with a 30-year mortgage. So I think that was kind of the trade-off that I had to make. And so I definitely feel like I have freedom right now. I do think as I get older, maybe that freedom will look differently and I'll have a different number attached to it. But right now I'm pretty content.
The house thing is
Yeah.
so interesting
Yeah.
because, well, one, it's like ingrained in us, right? That we're supposed to have it.
Part of the American dream.
Yeah. I mean, right there, boom.
Yeah.
That was some good marketing, whoever did that, I'm thinking. But also, and I did it. But the weird thing is I've only really had one house, because I guess we just bought enough. Actually, the reason why is because we were lucky enough to be in the market for a house in 2010, which
Oh,
was a
yeah.
great time looking backward. And I actually think a lot about how lucky I am because if we were trying to buy a house where we want to live right now, I don't know if we could,
Totally.
because it's like so ridiculous. But as doing this work on time freedom and freedom and flexibility, the house is an interesting asset because there's people have a lot of equity tied up in it, but it is locked, right? I mean, you could take out a HELOC or something and spend it on yourself, even though you shouldn't. There's little things you can do, but yeah, it's kind of like you've got wealth, but you don't have freedom.
Totally.
Exactly what
Totally.
you're
And
saying.
I think something I've read about a lot actually is why so many people right now do not feel like they're doing well financially. Like you'll read these headlines, and of course there are people that again are like living paycheck to paycheck, really struggling. But there's also like there's a record number of millionaires in this country. So it's like those people
Yeah.
also a lot of times say that they're struggling, and I think a lot of it is just what you said, where a lot of people's wealth is very much locked up in these illiquid assets, whether that be homes or retirement savings.
Retirement.
And
Yep.
again, like you can't eat a house. You can't, go on vacation with the
You
house.
shouldn't. You
Yeah, you
shouldn't.
shouldn't. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so I think because it's not this like easily accessible thing, and that's why really for me, I mean, I personally really define freedom as optionality. It's like
Yeah.
if I like, for example, woke up and I was like, I hate New York, I need to get out of here, I can. And some people can't do that. And I think
Yeah.
for me that is a freedom that is so worth it to me.
My vocabulary is minimal, but so optionality, the other word I often hear a lot is autonomy. Those are
Totally.
those are obviously different words because they're said differently. But like, yeah, I think they're somewhat related, perhaps, right? Like that,
Yeah.
because that's another word that I think of when I think of freedom too, is like the ability to do what you want and then have a lot of options for what
Yeah,
those
and
are.
I
There we
and
go.
I think too, a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people about like the current job market, and I think a lot of people feel like they purpose is like the word people keep coming back to, where it's like I don't feel like I have purpose in my work. And I think that is very combined with autonomy.
Mhm.
And I love kind of dispelling this notion, especially with young people, where it's like young people are lazy, they don't want to work. I would push back on that. I think a lot of people do want to work because that's where a lot of people derive their purpose. I think they just want a different structure than how it currently looks. And I think that is why a lot of young people are interested in the entrepreneurial path or the influencing path, which is kind of a form of entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
because it, at least in name, promises that sort of autonomy that I think a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah.
Mm.
One of the other concepts that you highlighted that was interesting to you in the book was around related to freedom is this
Mm.
concept of the savings mountain, right? Or
Mm.
this nest egg concept that you've experienced in your writing and hearing from your readers, like how that's a struggle for them versus this idea of riding this cash river. Like it's really like the income that savings can produce or that income can become coming from another source. I'm kind of curious if you could just go a little bit deeper into that in terms of what you meant by some of those things.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of people that I write for and just talk to, like I said, they're kind of stuck in this place where they're, on paper kind of making enough money to kind of live a good life. But I think there's a lot of paralysis around like where they're currently at financially and where they feel like they sort of need to be. And there's kind of two things happening. The first is like cognitive, like president bias, where okay, you can go into retirement calculator, look up how much you need to retire. It probably might be a couple $1,000,000 or more. That can be overwhelming for someone who has no
Yeah.
savings. It's like, holy how do I even start doing that? And also, like, okay, I'm like concerned with current Hannah's issues. I'm not thinking about 65-year-old Hannah. I don't know what she wants or what's going on with her. So it's a lot harder to like save for that future version of yourself where you can't even like conceptualize them really. And then the other part of it is like we live in a culture that is like hyper comparison and a very
Yeah.
consumption based culture. And I think a lot of people are influenced into thinking you need to have XYZ in order to have a good life. Like you need to have 10 million in the bank in order to have a good life. You need to have this giant house and multiple cars and you need to send your kid to this like $60,000 a year private school. And maybe that is important to you, but like, I think what people see on social media is like either it's fake, it's not real, it's someone pretending to be rich, or it's like the top 0.05% of the country. That's not the reality for most people. And so I think all of that together creates this like gap where people just feel in this state of lack, where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I feel like I'm never going to reach these goals. And then that's how you get into these kind of not super healthy financial habits where it's like, well, what's the point of saving or doing anything if, I'm never going to kind of reach these goals. And so I see that really all the time, at least in my writing and when I chat with people.
So I'm trying to build my social media presence. So I'm new to this. And so when you said that people are pretending to be rich, I actually had that thought once when I saw something come through. I'm like, I wonder if that's real. They're always like on an island or at some like hotel kind of looking out over a beautiful thing. Is that really a thing? Like, has
Oh
that
my
ever been
God.
like shown? I'm
Oh,
kind of
so
curious.
many you would be shocked. So, like, there's a bunch of things I've seen. The first I've seen is, like, you can literally rent like, they have, like, fancy apartments that you can rent for an hour and take pictures in and pretend it's your apartment. You
I
can
saw that
rent
in a show.
you can
I saw,
rent the set of a private jet and pretend like you're getting on a private jet.
oh my God.
Also, there's this other piece of, like, you're seeing someone on vacation, that could all be credit card debt. You have no idea how they paid for
Yeah.
that. Like, it's just,
Mhm.
and again, I think too most marketing is aspirational marketing, and that includes influencers. And so, like, they want you to be in a state of lack. They want you to be discontent because you're more easily sold to if you feel like you're missing something. It's like, okay, buy my product, whatever. So many influencers, that's what gets clicks. That's what drives views. That's what gets them money is aspirational content. Like most people aren't going to come on and saying, yeah, I'm really struggling with my finances, but buy my course. Right? No, they're
Yeah.
going to show you in this like fake Airbnb that they rented for like a couple $100 an hour. They're like, I retired at 20 on crypto, buy my crypto course. And so like, again, it's like insane. I mean, I could go on and on.
That's pretty awesome. I just had to take that little tangent because it was kind of interesting.
Well, I
But
have a
back to
question.
go
Yeah.
Kirby, please.
Since
Yeah.
you brought crypto up, like, what's your thought? Both of your thoughts, because Brian, I don't think we've ever talked about crypto.
I've evolved on that, but I'm curious, Hannah, what you think.
Also, one thing about me is I'm like horrifically opinionated about everything. So
That's awesome.
how
I
I feel
love
about
it.
crypto. The thing is, okay, so obviously, as we know, it was created as a store of value. I think we can all agree for the most part, it's not a store of value. It's an investment. It's an investment like other things are. I mean, who knows what happens with like stable coins. I mean, we'll see what happens there. But I think with anything, you should treat crypto as if you want to invest in it as a piece of your investment. Do I think it should be your whole portfolio? No. But I think it can be a portion of it if you're interested. Like a great example is like my portfolio, 10% of my portfolio, I call it like round part of my portfolio. And it's like, if I read about something, I'm interested, I'm like, oh, I think something could happen with this, I'll invest. And then I do have a little bit of money in crypto. Do I think that it is like, gonna be the end all be all and we should all no. I
Yeah.
also am concerned about, how it's entering Ks and that kind of thing. That does concern me a little bit because it was really created to be an alternative currency. And the fact that it's become really ingratiated in our economy is, to me, a little bit concerning. But that's either here nor there.
Yeah. I mean, my evolution of thought is actually related to the psychology of money, where one of the key points I remember from that is that people have different goals that
Yeah.
they're investing towards. So like, there's no one size fits all. And I've always been like, hell no, crypto, hell. I just made up in my own phrase.
That's great.
But now I thought, if I'm 20 and I have no one to, no one relying on me, why not take a swing for the fence? Boom,
Yeah,
like
that's
whatever,
I kind of see it.
whatever.
And again, it's like, I think it's like there's a way to do it within reason,
Yeah,
whether that be, okay, I'm only going to do this amount of money or this
yeah,
percent of my portfolio. But it's like investing in anything else is a little speculative, you know?
yeah.
Um,
I just know that for me personally, it's not really the right time or the right. Yeah,
yeah. Also, a big thing about me when it comes to investing is like, I am not a day trader. I don't want to be a day trader. And, obviously you don't have to day trade crypto, but I think a lot of that is so wrapped up in that culture. And I personally want to invest in things that I can leave my money in there for the long run. And I think just the way that crypto inherently works is
doesn't.
oftentimes
Yeah.
antithetical to that. So,
Yeah. So if I just want to circle back to the savings mountain kind of income coming from just a bit. And because the reason why you have the savings is so that you can draw on it. Right. And so when I finally came around to realizing like, well, that's the most important part. It's not building up the big amount. It's what you can get from it, that there are other ways to get that. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe this is like a somewhat of a solution to the fact that people haven't been able to save a lot, right? And not, for one, not like shaming you because you haven't, but giving you a different option for how you could be okay later in life. And so basically what I'm throwing out is like, instead of saving, sacrificing, and saving for the future, blah, 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 use that time to craft this perfect job. But it has to be one that you can physically, mentally, and psychologically want to work for a long time, because you may have to. But then also I'm thinking, well, maybe if this is the perfect job, you love it so much, you get so good at it that you can actually make a lot of money, and then now you can all of a sudden start saving. So this is kind of my weird kind of process of thought around that. But what kind of going off of that, you had some questions kind of, again, as we were preparing for the conversation about how does this work for people earlier, people in debt, or school debt and things like that. So I thought about it, but I'm curious if you think it could, or because I'm sure the listeners have that same concern, basically.
oh, definitely. And let me know if I'm going in the right direction. But the frame I was thinking about it is, I see a lot of young people where they're either, like I said, it's either like nihilism, where it's like, I'm never gonna have any money, so save, so like whatever. But then there's this other group of people where it's like, I'm gonna suffer, in my like 20s and 30s with this kind of idea that I'm gonna then have this number and then feel free. And again, it comes back to, you want to build contentedness into your life no matter what. And I think that's why I
Yeah.
really liked your framework, where it's like, why not, instead of seeing it like that, instead of building that kind of ability to like marry purpose and your work, so then you are able to save, but then also find fulfillment kind of in that moment. And so like, instead of hyper focusing on the number and that withdrawal rate and whatever, maybe it's like focusing on building skills, investing in relationships,
Yeah.
revenue streams that can give you that flexibility later in life. I'm like the biggest fan of people having multiple streams of income, because also the world is changing so fast. Like, there are industries appearing and disappearing, and I don't even necessarily know that my current job is going to exist in like 5 years. So for me, it's really about, what do I like to do? How can I adapt that to the current moment that we're in? And like, again, building those income streams. And I just think it's like, it's psychologically a lot more empowering. It's like basically comes down to like, you want to like live, what is it? Live to work, not work to live. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You want to have that mentality.
Yeah. I love it. The debt question is always a big one, because I will admit, when I started writing, I was not focused on people that were in debt, thinking, oh, if you're in debt, and this is terrible, but I'm like, well, go get that figured out first, then read my book. But the problem is, as I had early readers, there's this woman named Libby, for example, that I'm specifically remembering of. Her feedback was all about, I have a lot of student debt. On one hand, I really would love this life, but I can't get past the fact that I have this debt. Like, I can't even give myself permission to see it, which made me realize that I needed to address it. And
Mhm.
so again, thank goodness for early readers that you can add some things in, to the book related to this. But I mean, my take on it, I'm curious what you think, is like you got to pay it down. Like that's what you got to do. And actually, when you get that, when you finally clear it, that's the first sense of freedom you're going to feel right there. Maybe it's not like the optionality part yet, but at least you don't have that tugging at you.
Totally. Again, like what you just touched on is I think so much of it is really psychological.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to debt, because it's just an obstacle and a kind of the thing dragging you down. And I do think that when you have debt, it takes up a lot of your mental bandwidth. And so you're almost unable to look up and see down the road in the
Yeah.
future because you're so focused on this thing kind of dragging behind you. And so that's why, like, I hate the idea of, like, good debt, bad debt, whatever. It really is, like, I mean, there's very clearly, like, if you have, like, a buy now, pay later loan that has, like, 300% interest, yeah, that's bad debt. You should try to get rid of that as quickly as possible. But there are other types of, like, it really comes down to, like, what is gonna give you that sense of, like, contentedness and, like, make you feel and I know people that paid off their mortgages early simply because 'cause they're like, "I just don't wanna be locked into this." It just the idea of having this looming over my head for this many years, I don't wanna deal with that, and that's okay. Like, it's just really all about it all comes down to, like, how you wanna live your life, what you actually value, and what is gonna make you feel the most content in the moment. And actually, I wanna actually tell a personal story
Yeah.
about my mom when you think about time freedom and stuff is, she is about to retire next year and she's been working her whole life. And especially in the past, like probably 8 years or so, she's like, I'm so ready to retire. I'm just like over it. I can't work anymore, whatever. And, I always told her, well, what are you going to do when you retire? Because her life is her work. I mean, she was working like 80 hours a week. She's a doctor. And, she's like, oh, I'll figure out whatever. And I think a lot, I'm like, that's going to be an identity shift. When you go, your entire life and world is around this one thing, and then you shift, you see that as freedom. But unless you have a clear sense, and again, it comes back to values, unless you have a clear sense of what you want to do at that time and how you want to, like, again, design your life and live your life for that freedom, you're going to end up feeling the sense of lack or like purposelessness. And I think that's something you see that a lot when people go into retirement. And then also too, I think a lot about, for example, people that do fire. And obviously there's lots of different types of fire, but there's very strict forms of fire where you're
Right.
like not spending any money. You're being
The
as
original
frugal as,
fire.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
original fire, being as frugal as humanly possible. And I'm not saying that's like a bad thing. However, that becomes an identity for you. Not spending money becomes part of your identity. And so what I see all the time, anytime I'm on Reddit, I'll go in the fire Reddit because I always find this stuff so interesting. It's all these people that are like, I retired at 40. I have all this money. I cannot spend my money. I cannot enjoy my money. I am so anxious all the time because again, it comes back to like, you're not thinking about what you want your money to do for you. And that is a sense of freedom, knowing that.
I was listening to a fire podcast or whatever, and they were
Yeah.
coaching people on how to spend their money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
Huge.
this new thing, right? Because like all that time you just can't do it. And they're almost like, it's almost like practicing it. They're like,
I
just
know.
practice pulling out a little, practice
That's why
pulling out the
I'm
4%.
not the biggest fan of like the traditional fire because I am not a fan of anything that makes money central to your sense of self. That
Oh,
could be
yeah.
shopping, that could be saving. There has to be some sort of happy medium. I'm a big fan of like coast fire and more like, moderate versions where you're saving a lot, but you're saving to the point where you again have that optionality when you're older. But, I've interviewed so many people that they were saving like 80% of their income for
Wow.
20 years. And then it's like they're like paralyzed now. It's like they almost like want to go back to work because they're like, I don't even know what to do with myself.
You mentioned Coast Fire. I've thought a lot about this. I feel like Time Freedom is closest to Coast Fire, but I just
Yeah,
hate the name Coast because I don't like, I feel like if you're coasting, you don't really have goals anymore, or you're
totally.
not trying to do something. So it's like it's Coast Fire, but with goals.
Yes, definitely. And I will say, like, the actual, like, definition, it's not like you reach this point and then you don't have to do anything ever again. Like, you still kind of have to work and stuff. But what I
Yeah.
love about it is it kind of puts a name to things where you're like, I can relax a little bit.
Yeah.
Because again, some of these, like, retirement or these bigger goals, the numbers feel so huge and overwhelming. And I think that can lead to a lot of anxiety for people. And so just getting to a place where you're like, okay, I think I'm actually in an okay place. I can kind of maybe scale back a little bit or find a little bit more flexibility in my life, I think that's great. It's
Live my
psychological.
life. Yeah. Have you thought about what your life looks like in 10 years? How old will you be then? Like, but
I will be, I got in 10 years, I believe 40. I know.
I'll tell
Over
you,
the
when you
hill.
hit 40 is when you start looking different.
Okay, well, I can't I can't wait for that. Maybe I should then invest in I'll have to set some money
Yeah,
aside for
Yeah, right.
for dealing with that.
that's good. What I would tell
Um,
my younger self. Just kidding.
what my life will look like in, okay, I mean, like I said, definitely in New York.
Yep.
I think at some point in the next 10 years, I will decide if I want children or not, and I think that will probably be the defining
Yeah,
financial thing
for sure.
of
For
that
sure.
decade. I hear they're
Not
quite
just
expensive.
financial,
Yeah,
Not
not just
emotional.
just
financial.
financial.
Yeah. So I think that'll be the big thing, and that will really, I think, shape probably the rest of my financial decisions is based on that. But for me, again, I think it really does come down to, and this does factor in the kids' conversation of at this point in my life, I cannot imagine rigid stability. Something I just adore right now in this phase of my life is having so much flexibility and really only having to think about what I want and what I want to do. It's like a
It's
great,
pretty
obviously
cool. It's
it's a
pretty
great
cool.
feeling.
Enjoy it. Enjoy
Yeah.
it.
But who knows? Maybe in a couple years, I'll change my mind. And actually, it's funny. People ask me all the time because it's like, I'm still saving 30-40% of my income. And people will say, well, you're saving so much money. Like, what are you saving for? And it's kind of like, I don't know at this point.
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily, I don't have this very strict goal in mind, but it just comes down to if I get to an age and I'm like, you know what, I want a house or I want to have kids, I'll be able to make that decision hopefully without the financial constraint.
Yeah,
I don't want to have to make any decision from a place of lack, if that makes sense.
that's awesome. Well,
And I also need a plastic surgery budget as well. Yeah.
I hear you're supposed to start early. I did not get the memo, so.
It's too much. It's too much work. It's like I was just
yeah,
talking to my friends about this the other day. I was like, it's like I can't keep track of all this.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
can't do it.
it's the things that nobody tells you about until you're there and you're like, I could have done this 10 years ago and
I
saved for
know.
this, but
I
okay,
know.
thank you.
I think too, it's like the technology is changing. It's like in 10 years there's gonna be some new thing, and I'll get that.
There you
Yeah.
go.
All right. Well, before we kind of wrap up, I would definitely want to ask you where people can find you, or is there anything else that you would want to share, or kind of open floor here?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I write a newsletter about money psychology and just I talk a lot about what's happening in the world around us and how it kind of shapes how we think about money and handle our own money. And then I also do content, about the same topics. You can find me on any social media channel under Your Brain on Money. And then lastly, I do financial planning. So if anybody who's interested in one-on-one financial planning, but that's very rooted in behavioral stuff. I would say a
Mhm.
big piece of my work is yes, like the traditional, I'm going to help you, build a financial plan, but it's very much like how can we improve your relationship with money? And so that's really the work that I've been doing.
So important. Wow. Well, thank you. We will put all that information in the notes on the show. But anyway, thank you, Hannah. I loved your insights, and I really appreciate you coming on the show with us.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. How cool was it to have Hannah on the podcast? That was great.
Yeah, she's so cool.
I think what I realized, this was my first takeaway, is I need more New York people in my life. I'm very Midwestern and West Coast focused. And every time I meet someone from New York, I'm like, man, you got good energy. I love it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think my key takeaways were, I just love her focus on financial psychology. And I can't believe that personally, I didn't really even think of anything like that for probably up until 5 years ago. But it is so important. Like this idea that we're sold that, we make rational decisions in economics. We do not make rational decisions. We make reasonable decisions, and that's all rooted in psychology. I think that's the one big one. And then the other one is that, as a 30-year-old, I feel like more and more of these younger generations are focused on living their lives now, while they can, and not just blindly saving for the future, and she explained that tug that she has, but I feel that for that reason, the concept of time freedom is not just for me, the mid 40-year-old, or who I thought was my original target, but it's for the Gen Zs and the millennials and whatever the other one before that is. So anyway, I just left the conversation really energized.
Yeah, it was really good. And I second all of those. One of the things I was just scrolling through my notes here that I love that she talked about too is the money anxiety, and that we
Yeah.
have like the proving, and we've anchored ourselves to like to a number. And we've talked about that before on previous episodes, is like, what is that exact number? And it's so different for each of us. And one of the questions that she mentioned was, so what is enough and what will it give you for the time freedom? And then what do you value and what do you want your money to do with you to create the optionality? And I think that that was a word, when she said optionality, that was a word that I hadn't thought about before. But when it comes down to it, really, I mean, that to me is like a true definition of time freedom, of the flexibility to say yes to what you want and no to what you don't want. And there is that, not such a pressure behind each of them.
I agree with you completely on that word optionality. Like that's what we're going after.
Yeah. And I really love, you mentioned the psychology of the money and that she's bringing that awareness to younger people, because I love that she opened, like they talked about those things in her household. They talked about money. They talked about the relationship there, where so many households aren't that way. And I know we've talked about it before also on another episode, about just like that identity that you have around that first relationship with money. And so bringing that awareness, and especially for women, you don't get that education unless you take accounting classes or some sort of a business class around that. So I really love that she's bringing that awareness.
Yeah. I mean, how cool. Like anyone willing to kind of carry that torch and move it forward is awesome in my book. Well, awesome. Well, that wraps another episode here on our second season, which we're just kicking off. And I just urge everyone to find us at timefreedom.life, and also like and subscribe on all the channels, and leave us a good, nice, or leave us a fair review. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, listeners of the podcast, I have a special deal for you. You can now pre-order my book, Time Freedom, if you go to the link timefreedombook.com. And my special is, normally, if you order 3 books, you can get the audiobook free immediately. If you put the promo code podcast, you can order 1 book at your favorite retailer, Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, wherever, and put your order number in the form, put the promo code podcast, and I'll immediately send you the audiobook for free right away, so you don't have to wait. Pre-order the hard copy book, get the audiobook free. Thank you so much for your support. timefreedombook.com.